Smile. Go on, just for a second. Picture yourself smiling in a photograph. The easy way you bare a row of teeth without a flicker of thought. You do it 100 times a year, and you never once wonder where those teeth came from. They came from you. Of course they did. But for the wealthy of 200 years ago, that sentence was not a given at all. A full set of straight, white, healthy teeth was so rare and so precious that the rich would pay a small fortune to buy one. And the finest teeth money could buy, the most prized and the most expensive of all, came from the mouths of young men lying dead in the mud of a battlefield in Belgium. That is not a metaphor. Across Europe, for decades, fashionable men and women sat at dinner parties, laughed, flirted, and smiled, wearing inside their own mouths the teeth of soldiers who had been killed in battle. They knew it, too. Some of them even bragged about it.
To understand how an entire society arrived at something so grotesque, and why the people who bought these teeth were not horrified, but delighted, you have to start with a problem you have almost certainly never had. The rich of the 18th and 19th centuries were losing their teeth, all of them, and they were losing them young. The question is why? And the answer begins with something sitting in your kitchen right now: sugar. For most of human history, it was a rare luxury, something almost nobody ever tasted. Then the transatlantic slave trade turned the plantations of the Caribbean into engines of cheap sugar, and it came flooding into Europe. And the people who could afford it first, the wealthy, began eating it in quantities no human mouth had ever faced before. Sugar in the tea, sugar in the cakes, sugar in everything, all day long, eaten by people who had no idea what it was doing to them, and no real habit of cleaning their teeth. The result was an epidemic of rot. Mouths full of decay, abscesses, constant pain, and gaps where teeth used to be. And here is the bitter joke buried at the heart of it. The very thing that marked you as rich, your sugar, was the thing quietly destroying the one feature that mattered most. Because in that world, your teeth were not only for eating, they were your status. They were your face. Think about what it actually meant to lose them. A toothless person's cheeks collapse inward. The whole face folds in on itself. You look decades older than you are. Your speech turns to a mumble. You cannot eat properly in front of anyone. For the upper classes, whose entire lives were built on appearance, on dinners, on being seen, this was a quiet catastrophe. The toothless learned to keep their mouths closed, to speak as little as they could, to hide behind a raised hand. There is a reason the folding fan became such a fashionable accessory in exactly this era. It was not only elegant, it was a screen, lifted to hide rotten stumps and breath that could empty a room. So if you were wealthy and your teeth were going, what could you do? You could buy new ones. False teeth existed, and they were almost uniformly terrible. The early dentures were carved from ivory, hippopotamus, walrus, elephant, or from animal bone. They were riveted onto plates and forced into the mouth, and they had problems that are hard to even imagine today. They rarely fit. They were often so loose you could not actually eat with them, so people simply took them out at the table. And worst of all, ivory and bone have no enamel, so they slowly soaked up the moisture of the mouth and began, in place, to rot. The wearer ended up with a permanent foul taste, and breath so vile the fan came straight back out. You had paid a fortune to fix the problem, and bought yourself a slightly different version of the same one. There was only one material that truly solved it: real human teeth. They looked exactly right, because they were exactly right. They kept their color, they had their own hard enamel, so they resisted the rot that wrecked ivory. A set of dentures built around real human teeth was the gold standard, the thing every wealthy mouth in Europe wanted, which left the dentist with one enormous, awkward question. Where do you get a steady supply of fresh, human teeth? That question turned out to have some very dark answers. The first source was the living. The poor, if they were desperate enough, could be persuaded to sell the teeth straight out of their own heads. Sit with the arithmetic of that for a moment. You are starving, and a man offers you a few coins for your front teeth, pulled out on the spot with no pain relief of any kind, leaving you disfigured for the rest of your life, so that a rich stranger can have a nicer smile. Some people said yes. In one advertisement from the 1780s, a dentist offered 2 guineas apiece for sound teeth, and there were always hands willing to take the money. The second source was the dead, and here the tooth trade braided together with one you may have met before: the resurrectionists, the body snatchers who crept through graveyards in the dark. Some of them realized they did not even need to haul away an entire corpse to turn a profit. They could simply open the mouth and take the teeth, smaller, lighter, easier to hide, and astonishingly valuable. Teeth were pulled from the bodies of the hanged, from dissection rooms, from fresh graves.
And if you think this was some grubby little secret at the margins of society, consider whose mouth it reached. You already know one of the men who wore these teeth, George Washington. You have probably been told his false teeth were made of wood. They were not. They never were.
Washington's dentures were built from gold, from brass, from carved ivory, and from real human teeth. And by the time he was sworn in as the first president of the United States, he had a single tooth of his own left in his head. And there is one more entry in this story, written in his own plantation's account books. In 1784, Washington paid for 9 teeth taken from enslaved people he owned at Mount Vernon. Historians are careful here, and so will I be. We cannot prove those exact teeth ended up in the president's mouth, and they may have gone into his dentist's stock instead. But the ledger entry is real, and so is what it stands for. People who were owned, who could never truly say no, had teeth drawn from their heads so that a powerful man could smile. The same cold logic was running on both sides of the ocean. In Europe, it would soon be paid in soldiers. In America, it was already being paid in the bodies of the enslaved. But all of it together, the sellers, the snatchers, the gallows, the powerless, was never nearly enough. Demand always outran supply, and so the prices stayed staggering. A single human tooth could cost several times the price of an artificial one. A full set of dentures with real teeth could run to more than £100, the equivalent of tens of thousands today, more than a laborer earned in a year. The hunger for teeth was bottomless, and the supply was a trickle. What this whole trade was waiting for, though no one would ever have dared to say it out loud, was a sudden, enormous source of young, healthy teeth, all in one place, all at once. On the 18th of June, 1815, it got exactly that. That was the day of the Battle of Waterloo. On a stretch of farmland in Belgium, the army of Napoleon met the Allied forces under the Duke of Wellington and the Prussians under Blucher. And across a single day, more than 150,000 men fought, and tens of thousands of them died. By nightfall, the fields were carpeted with bodies. Young men, mostly. Fit men, in the prime of their lives, who that very morning had been strong and whole. And as darkness came down over that horror, figures began to move across the field. Not to bury anyone, not to help the wounded. They came with pliers. They were scavengers. Some were locals. Some were surviving soldiers. And some had traveled all the way from Britain specifically for this, because they understood what a battlefield was now worth. They moved from corpse to corpse in the dark, stripping the valuables, and then, with a speed and skill that any dentist would have envied, they forced open the mouths of the dead and pulled out the front teeth, the clean ones. The white ones. The incisors and the canines at the front, the easiest to extract, leaving the heavy molars behind. They worked through the whole night, filling their pockets, then their bags. The harvest of Waterloo was so vast that the teeth were not counted, but measured by the barrel, shipped back across the Channel to England in their thousands. And it was not only the teeth. In one of the strangest footnotes of all, the bones of the Waterloo dead were later gathered in such quantities that they were shipped to England by the ton, crushed, and sold as fertilizer to be spread across English farmland. The young men who fell at Waterloo ended up scattered, quite literally, into the soil of their enemies, and into the mouths of strangers. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. You might assume the people who bought these teeth had no idea where they came from, and that if they had found out, they would have been sickened. The opposite is true. The origin was the selling point. Dentists advertised these dentures openly as Waterloo teeth or Waterloo ivory, and customers came looking for them by name. Why would anyone want that? Because everyone knew the alternative. Teeth from a graveyard came from someone old or diseased, who had died slowly and lain rotting in the ground. Teeth from the gallows came from a criminal left hanging too long. But Waterloo teeth, the marketing promised, came from something far better. Young, strong, healthy men, cut down in an instant in the full bloom of life, their teeth still perfect at the moment of death. To the buyer, a dead soldier's tooth was not a horror. It was a guarantee of quality. People paid more for it on purpose. So picture the finished object. A dentist takes a barrel of teeth, pulled from dozens of different dead strangers. He sorts them. He boils them to clean them, the only sterilizing anyone thought to do. He cuts away the roots, files each one to shape, and rivets them in careful rows onto a plate of carved ivory, trying to match an upper set to a lower, so that it looks like one person's smile. It never was. Every grin built this way was a mosaic, assembled from the mouths of men who had died side by side and never once known each other. And then, a wealthy gentleman or an elegant lady fitted that mosaic into their own gums and went out to dinner and smiled. So what finally ended it? Not conscience, technology. Through the middle of the 19th century,
dentists slowly cracked the problem of building a false tooth that was actually good. A London denture maker named Claudius Ashe, who by some accounts loathed handling dead men's teeth, perfected hard, convincing porcelain teeth in the 1830s. Later, a tough new material called vulcanite gave dentures a cheap, comfortable base that ordinary people could finally afford. Bit by bit, the manufactured tooth became better and cheaper than the stolen one, and the grim economics that had powered the entire trade collapsed. But understand just how slowly it died. The taste for real teeth lingered for decades. Fresh supplies were gathered from the battlefields of the Crimean War in the 1850s, and when the American Civil War filled fields with the dead in the 1860s, the tooth scavengers went to work there too, and barrels of teeth were shipped back across the Atlantic to fill the mouths of Europe all over again. This was not the distant Middle Ages. People were wearing the teeth of the battlefield dead within living memory of the camera, the railway, and the telegraph. And here is the thread that runs all the way down to you. Your teeth, white and straight in that photograph, are still a status symbol. We have not changed that at all. We have only changed the price.
Today, the wealthy still buy perfect smiles, with whitening, with veneers, with implants screwed straight into the bone of the jaw. The desire is the exact same desire that sat in those candlelit drawing rooms. The deep, old human urge to show the world a flawless set of teeth and be judged worthy because of it. The only difference is that your perfect smile is now manufactured in a clean laboratory out of porcelain and titanium, anonymous and bloodless. For 100 years, the wealthy got theirs another way. They wore the dead. So the next time you smile in a photograph, that easy, automatic baring of your own teeth that costs you nothing and that you never once think about, hold the thought for just a moment longer. Remember that a full mouth of healthy teeth was once a treasure so rare that men crossed the sea to a killing field and pried it, one tooth at a time, from the jaws of the young dead. Your smile is your own. You will never have to wonder whose it used to be. And that, quietly, is one of the strangest luxuries you will ever own.